not to hammer home on the SB277 thing, but what really struck me the most about that scenario was how so many of my close friends were in favor of SB277 and how many people in my community thought it was a great idea to have people fully vaccinated. And I again, for me at that moment, what I realized is that my job was paradigm shifting. Any public opportunity that I got, whether it was Facebook Live or on a stage or wherever I was, my job is to change people's thinking and their paradigm of health. Because that is the only way we're going to get out of this. That's the only way we're going to get out of this healthcare mess we're in. It's the only way we're going to stop ridiculous bills like that. So, just thank you, Sean. But it's just an obsession to want to help people change their paradigm. So. Okay, let's talk about chronic fatigue. Let me see if I can get to it. So I gave Nicole, maybe 5 or 6 protocols I could do. And I really didn't want to do this one, to be honest with you. And let me tell you why. When I was 19 years old, I was in college. I was a competitive tennis player. I played on a tennis scholarship, and I started getting really bad shin splints that led into compartment syndrome. You guys know what compartment syndrome is in your legs? So it's where your lower compartments of your legs swell up. And I would wake up in the middle of the night. It would feel like somebody was shooting me in the back of my calf. I couldn't really do the practices the way I wanted to. Tennis is a lot of like on your toes kind of thing. So if you have compartment syndrome in your lower legs, it's very, very painful. And I actually at that point got really addicted to ibuprofen. I was taking 5 to 10 ibuprofen a day. I would walk into the trainer's room and they would hand me bags of ibuprofen to solve my leg problem. Eventually, after months of that, and I had a coach that was yelling at me, and I was on a scholarship, so I was holding a scholarship position, so there was no room for injury. They did surgery. They did a fasciotomy. Has anybody ever heard of fasciotomy? They basically, to this day, I have a scar here and a scar here on both of my legs, and they go in and they release the fascia so that your legs can swell. Which now, knowing what I know, I'm like, well, that's silly. Why wouldn't you just stop the swelling of the legs? Why would you create room for the legs to swell? Like, it's duh. But I didn't think of it like that back then. So I came out of the surgery. The surgery was done in October. And by the time, I had now moved from ibuprofen to Percocet. And I was doing Percocet pretty much daily. And by the time I got home to over Christmas break, to my house, I could not get out of bed. I would wake up in the morning, I would walk to the kitchen table, and I would try to have a conversation with my mom. I would try to eat, and then I would go back to bed and would sleep till about 3 in the afternoon. Then I would go back to the kitchen table, try to eat something else. I would go back to bed, and about 10 o'clock at night, I was super wound up. Anybody ever had chronic fatigue syndrome? No, but anybody had Epstein-Barr virus? This is what it feels like. And so after about 2 weeks of that, my mom looked at me and was like, this is not right, and took me to a chronic fatigue specialist. And this is down in LA. I grew up in LA. And we go to the specialist, and the guy sits behind this white mahogany desk this brown mahogany desk with his white coat on. And he looks at me. He had run he had looked at taken my blood, so he knew I had high Epstein-Barr virus numbers. He had done actually a brain scan and saw that my brain was inflamed. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, you have chronic fatigue. And so my mom, being the optimistic woman that she is, was like, wow, that's amazing. Okay, great. What are we going to do? And he pulls out a sheet, and it has a list of about 10 drugs on it. And they have little hash marks next to it. And he said, well, this drug worked 4 times. This drug worked 10 times. This one worked 12 times. He's like, so we'll start with the first drug, and then we'll go down the list until we find one that works. And the brain fog, by the way, with Epstein-Barr and chronic fatigue is intense. So if you have these patients in your office, you are going to have to repeat what you say to them over and over and over again. They will not hold on to it. So as verbose as I love to be, you have to be very succinct with them. So my mom kind of scratched her head and was like, well, that doesn't seem like a solution. She has to go back to college. She's on a tennis scholarship. She's got to fulfill her duties there. And what can we do? And he, in his snooty, arrogant way, looked at me and said, well, you sure don't look like you could go back to college. And what I now know in my, the year where I am, where I sit today, is that actually was the gift to launch me into being a healthcare practitioner, because I never, ever, ever wanted to have that attitude and that callousness with any patient, and I wanted to create solutions for people around chronic fatigue. So I actually got into natural healthcare hoping to help a lot of chronic fatigue patients. On that particular day, my mom, anybody from LA? Anybody? Okay, well, getting anywhere in LA is like, what, an hour and a half? We had to go from, I think it was like Orange County to Santa Monica, so it was like a 2-hour drive. And my mom was so irate with this guy that she like picked me up and I in my like fatigue state and says, we're gonna go see my homeopathic MD. I don't know why she didn't take me there first, but we went to the specialist. So we go straight to Dr. Luke. He looks at me and he says, you absolutely have to change your diet. You are only allowed to eat meat, vegetables, and fat. We didn't call it the ketogenic diet back then, but he basically said, you got to get off all grains, all beans, all fruit. You got to get off all of that. That's all you're going to eat. We did IV drips. I don't know why he didn't. I think that was just in his protocol. He did acupuncture with me. We left his office and went to the chiropractor that I grew up with. And he was like, you need to come in and get adjusted as much as possible while you're in town. So I was there every day. And the medical doctor had given me the prognosis of about, I think he had said with these trial drugs, within a couple of years, we might begin to see some change. I was 19 years old. Like that would have been the end of my life. And with the natural protocols and this team of people, within 3 weeks, I was back on a plane. I went to the University of Kansas. I was back on a plane. Within about 6 weeks, I was back on the tennis court. I was able to compete that season. It took about a year or so of continual work to really get over the hump. But you definitely, my point in telling you this is we are the solution for this. And there's so many people that are struggling with fatigue. And there's an Epstein-Barr, I think I heard it, I know Dr. Pompa said this, I think Dawn said it, Shane may have said it, is that Epstein-Barr may not be the source of the problem. It's the immune system not being able to handle the Epstein-Barr. And when I go back and I look at that, I grew up in a moldy home. I know my mom had heavy metals that got passed down to me. I was at college eating crappy food. I wasn't getting enough rest. I was beer and pizza at midnight. Isn't that what we do in college? And then I had the surgery with all the medication, and it just put me over the edge that allowed the Epstein-Barr to show up. So know that if somebody comes in with Epstein-Barr, it's a part of a bigger picture, just like everything else. And Epstein-Barr is in the classic chronic fatigue syndrome. It is the brain fog, it is the exhaustion during the day, but they can't sleep at night, which is so frustrating. Does anybody have patients like this? So frustrating when you're like exhausted all day, but then when it's actually time to sleep, you can't sleep. It's fibromyalgia, so a lot of muscle achiness everywhere. So and exhaustion, you couldn't really move your body very well. There's a taste, every once in a while I'll get the taste in my mouth and I'm like, I don't know what that is. I haven't figured that out yet, but when I get it, I go, whoa, time to chill out, because I never want to let that virus get a hold of me again. You don't ever get rid of it. It's there. Your immune system gets stronger. So once you have Epstein-Barr, and I do have a core group of patients that have Epstein-Barr that we're working with, you always have to be on top of it. You always have to keep your immune system up. It's not something you can ever really take your eye off of. So be aware of that piece. So the first question, I've got 2 patients right now recently that we have taken through this exact protocol. They have very similar symptoms as to me. One gal was actually, I feel like I'm seeing myself in her because she's in her early 20s and an athlete and transitioning from college into the working world. I have seen quite a few of, I don't know if they're kids, young adults, what do you call them at that age, but where they're coming out of college and they're going into the workforce, but their body has been like decimated by whatever they've done in college. So that transition is where some of this Epstein-Barr will show up. I have seen that before. So you got to go and look at the root causes. Candida and Epstein-Barr go hand in hand. I had massive candida, and once I got out of college a couple of years after this, I went after the candida. That was what I did. And again, to this day, I will stay away from things that produce candida because of the fear of the Epstein-Barr coming back. So when you have a patient with Epstein-Barr, you have a patient with chronic fatigue, you got to think about candida. You can test, like gut zoomers are great for testing candida, or you just can observe off the symptoms. Sugar cravings, brain fog are kind of the classics. If I get a patient that tells me, I just crave sugar, I can't, it's out of control, I don't know how to even begin to monitor it, I immediately think candida. And that was me at 19 years old. I was sugar, I was beer, I was pizza. Those were like my 3 things that I really love to eat. So remember with chronic fatigue that candida is a big thing. Okay, upper cervical area. So Dawn talked about this, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So with a lot of chronic fatigue patients, their sympathetic nervous system has been so on overdrive and so overstimulated, and the parasympathetic is so untrained. So it's like weakened. Well, like I said before, the chiropractic adjustment stimulates these NMDA receptors in the up at the base of the brainstem and starts to increase vagal tone. So when you increase vagal tone, what you do is you start to train the parasympathetic nervous system to be strong again. So we are now doing some things with our patients like Dr. Pompa talked about this, gargling. I have a little routine that I have my chronic fatigue patients do before they go to bed because I know that their vagal tone is low, I know their parasympathetics are low, and I know they want to sleep. So they brush their teeth, they gargle with the water, with whatever water they have there, then cold water on your face. So very really cold, abrupt water on the face will stimulate the facial nerve. And then when you get into bed, there's an incredible book. Dawn talked about books. So there's an incredible book called Accessing the Vagal Nerve, I believe is the total title. You want to stimulate the ocular cranial nerve. So you have them put their hands behind their head. They look straight up. To start with, and then for 1 minute, they turn their head to the right and hold a locked position. They can time it on their phone. They hold their eyes locked to the right, and then when the timer goes off, they hold it to the left and lock it to the left, and that stimulates the ocular nerve, which starts to upregulate the vagal tone and improve the parasympathetic nervous system. So I have them do that routine before they go to bed. The other night I did I woke up at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and I tossed and turned for an hour, and then I decided, okay, it must be my sympathetic nervous system turned on. I could feel my heart rate really high, and so I did that. I just did this, boom, boom. 10 minutes later, I was out. You're just putting your hands here, and so there's no real specific contact, and you're just looking straight up to start. But what you want to make sure you don't do is you're not turning your head. You're just turning your eyes because you're trying to stimulate your ocular nerve because that's what starts to improve vagal tone. So I have them do that routine to help get a better night's sleep. And no, it doesn't make sense with chronic fatigue that they wouldn't sleep. But I am telling you because I lived it that it does make sense. Okay. The other thing that doesn't work well with chronic fatigue patients is the clicker. What's wrong with me? Maybe it's the, okay, not sure. Alcohol. Alcohol depresses the nervous system. So you want to make sure, I'm not getting much. You want to make sure that they're not drinking. Wait, it buzzed, hold on. I have one patient that is a high-profile realtor. Yeah, I don't know, guys. In Seattle, and I am very certain that we know she has heavy metals because we tested her heavy metals. I'm pretty sure she has mold. She tests really high for Epstein Barr. She's tested positive for Candida, and thank you. She is a lot of the professionals that I work with, whether they are realtors or lawyers or financial planners, what I'm finding is the more high profile, the more social events that they do for networking. Has anybody noticed that with their clients? So then you give them these strategies for their health, but then they're stuck in this quandary because when they go out to eat, what are they going to do? So we've had to come up with some creative solutions around drinking for her because it's a real sticking point. And ultimately with this realtor who had really bad chronic fatigue, I just told her, you're just gonna have to make a choice. If you wanna drink the alcohol, you're gonna be more fatigued. If you don't drink the alcohol, then you're gonna have more energy. So sometimes it comes down to that. Fasting. With a chronic fatigue person, fasting can be really difficult, and I'm a huge fan of fasting. So please start light, push back breakfast an hour. I think fasting can be really helpful for chronic fatigue patients, but if they're already tanked, sometimes fasting doesn't work. This would be the one scenario that I'm really, really hesitant to fast. Then I move to all those amazing supplements. I think about mitochondria. I think about PrEP. PrEP is amazing for the chronic fatigue patient. Like almost 100% of the time, the things that are in PrEP will turn that chronic fatigue patient and they start to get some energy and personality back. If you want to specifically target the mitochondria, you could do E-Energy, Moors, Vista 1 and 2, and just stick with that because you're getting the cell membrane, you're also getting the membrane of the mitochondria, and then you're getting the nutrients into the mitochondria. Those of you who have, anybody read Terry Wall's book, The Autoimmune Protocol, or the Wall's Protocol? It's about autoimmunity and MS. You guys never read that? Okay, go look at her TED Talk. Her name is Terry Walls, and she is a medical doctor who was diagnosed with MS, and she started all the trial medication and figured out that the medication was making her worse. So she identified that MS was coming from a dysfunction in the mitochondria. So she started, she's doing the ketogenic diet. She just doesn't call it that. But she realized that certain nutrients helped power up the mitochondria. The nutrients look very similar to what you'll see in E-Energy and Moors, but she also identified that ketones will help heal the mitochondria. So getting them, if you can get them into ketosis, it can be between PrEP or if you decide to do E-Energy, Moors, and Vistas, that can be that bump that gets you in to just giving them a little extra energy. Now, what you often have to do is make sure that they don't overdo it. The Epstein-Barr patient will overdo it all the time because the minute they feel better, they want to go enjoy life. So they can overdo it, and then you can slip backwards. So really, give them like, hey, go do something for the afternoon, but then come back and rest. Make sure that you think ahead of time about teaching them how to pace themselves because they can get so excited. So first thing I would do would power up the mitochondria. I would power up antioxidants and strengthen the immunity because you're dealing with an immunity that's on overload. So I'm back at Epic and Rocks. DV3, another awesome option. This is where I lean on DV3 a lot, is with my Epstein-Barr patients. And then you got to go, the first three to me are builders. They're building up. And once I start to see that we've got the patient getting some more energy, they're starting to heal, Then I'll go over and go, okay, what can we kill? But if they're so depleted and you go in and kill candida, it can be really difficult on the patient right off the bat. Or you go in and detox heavy metals, it can be really difficult. All that chronic fatigue, all I wanted was somebody to just give me some hope that this wasn't going to last forever. I needed my body to be built up again. So don't always, even though we know the virus needs to be killed, we know candida needs to be killed, start with the builders, build them up, and then you can go and look at when is the appropriate time to kill the candida. And then I'll move into, I do the gut first. I'll do 1 round of candida, and then I'll go into doing heavy metals. Usually at this point, if we feel like the candida is under control, we'll do a heavy metal test and see what's going on there, just to know what the metal load is that we're working with, and we'll move them through TCD at that point. And we've done one-offs of ACX, or if they're into smoothies, I'll get the Excel in there. So I'll sneak it in ways that are slow and make it more stable. Because again, even with the chronic fatigue patient, if they're showing signs that they're doing better, they can turn in a moment. So you got to be, of all the conditions that we work with, I feel like, maybe it's because I've lived this one, you have to pace yourself and you have to be slow and steady. When you know there's all these things going on, don't overwhelm this immune system. This immune system needs love, and then it needs some pulling of the toxins out. Now, here's what I think so interesting, is that when most people are fatigued, what do they think? Adrenals. And I'm the same way. I've gotten caught so many times throwing GA at something, and only to find out months down the road, we're not getting where we need to be. So not that there would be a problem with GA, but it just means that we've got a deeper chronic fatigue issue. So if you're identifying that GA is not getting somebody's adrenals up, I either go up into the brain and think heavy metals, or I start to think about, I don't run Epstein-Barr tests on a lot of people, but if we've done a lot of work and they're still fatigued, we will then run an Epstein-Barr test to see if there's a chronic fatigue there. But after you've done 1 through 6, then you can start to look at strengthening the adrenals. That's the way I have found it to be the most beneficial. And then the last ones I use as needed. Neurocin, amazing. I actually think Neurocin may be my favorite systemic formula supplement. I love it. For the chronic fatigue patient, it just gives them instant clarity, and it's so, so wonderful. B-Brain, the same thing. And then remember that they don't sleep, that DREM may be the gift that they need to start to sleep, along with those 3 activities that I showed you. So it's complicated. It takes years. I think you can turn it around pretty quickly with the diet changes I just told you about that turned me around really quickly. And then you can start to build from there. But as they get better, again, of all the conditions that I've worked with, I really caution the chronic fatigued patient to pace themselves, because if they overdo it, they can put themselves back into the overstimulated place. Make sense? Is that helpful? Okay, I've got 15 minutes left, so let me go through my last protocol. Oh. Uh-oh, there it is. Okay, so another, I think we've heard it a couple of times up here, another personal path to this protocol, and of all the protocols I've implemented, this has been the most painful one. And what you see there, month 1 through 3, was actually, I cannot take credit for it. Dr. Pompa put it together for me when I had a situation with my mom last spring. So my mom that raised me naturally, who wanted to keep medication out of our house, that taught me how to read labels, at nutrition labels when nobody else was reading it. We grew up in a sugar-free home. I had supplements at my breakfast table every morning. She is now 79 years old, and 4 years ago, she became addicted to painkillers. She went in, got a hip replacement, and came out of that and got onto Vicodin, was taking multiple Vicodin a day, and ended up, long story short, got the other hip replaced, came out of that, the first surgery, pain wasn't gone, was addicted to Vicodin, got the other hip replaced because that was the solution, right, by the medical world, came out of that and ended up completely addicted to opioids. And totally changed her personality. She was an incredible mom, still is an incredible mom, but just totally sideswiped me. Like, I just blew me away. And last spring, my dad called me on a Friday afternoon and said, your mom's on the ground in the bathroom in so much pain, I don't know what to do, can you come? And I said to him, well, there's not really anything I can do with an adjustment. It's not like I'm gonna show up and give her an adjustment or a supplement. This is a bigger issue. And again, long story short, I got there. She was screaming like I'd never heard anybody scream before, in so much pain. And we had to call the ambulance, who came in, and they had to pick her up off the floor. And of course, they wanted to know what she was on. And she denied it and said, I'm not on anything, I'm not on anything. And I pulled one of the paramedics aside and I said, she's addicted to opioids and she's probably been drinking today. I was also raised in a non-alcoholic family where we didn't have alcohol at all. And she heard me say that and was yelling at me like an addict would. And we got her into the ambulance, got her to the emergency room. By the time I showed up, she yelled at me as a mother shouldn't and was like, you don't know what the pain I'm going through. This is my 79-year-old mother who is an amazing person. I want to kill myself. I can't live with this kind of pain anymore. Why did you tell them that I take those medication? I just need more medication. And long story short, I just held my ground and said, I love you so much, and I want you to stick around. And I was aware that it was the drugs talking, and I said, let's let them do their job, and tomorrow we'll talk about it. So the next day, I pulled she and my dad over, and I said, here's the deal, guys. I can't participate in that dysfunction anymore. So if you want my help, then this is what I do for a living. I help people get out of these chronic pain situations. This is what I do. So you can't just dabble in this protocol with me. You need to either be all in or don't call me on a Friday afternoon when mom needs to be picked up off the bathroom floor. By the way, she had a patch on that a friend had given her. Friends had been giving her more medication. She had some fentanyl patch on or something like that. So she was really an addict. Bottom line, my parents said, okay, we'll do it. We'll do anything you tell us to do, and we'll both do it together 100%. My dad is 83 years old. And so I was like, okay. So the first thing I did is they were living a gluten-free life. My mom was a gluten-free junkie. Do you guys know those people who are gluten-free and they think they're so healthy, and it's junk food. It's gluten-free junk food. Okay, that was my mom. Like, she's like, but I'm gluten-free. And I said, Mom, you're going grain-free now. And she was like, well, what does that mean? I said, all the gluten-free cookies, all the gluten-free muffins, all the gluten-free breads, but they're organic. I don't care. I want them all out of the house. And then we went into rice. You're gonna take rice out? You're gonna take quinoa out? Like, we took her off of all grains, all starches. I will tell you, to this day, that has been the most powerful thing we have done for her. And if she was sitting here, she would tell you that. That made a huge difference within like a couple of days getting her completely off of grains. Second thing, and I'll just skip to the diet, is that we changed all her fats. Now, my parents, even though they're 79 and 83, are the most social people on the planet, and they're always out eating with their friends. So I have now helped her see that the days after she eats out, because we don't know what those oils are, she actually does worse. The next day she wakes up in pain. So I've really encouraged her to stop eating out. So she's slowed down the eating out or just orders things that aren't grilled or have oils on it. So changing the oils is also important. Third thing, fasting. So she didn't want to fast. She was like, what? What do you want me to do? And I'm like, you're not going to eat breakfast. You're going to just stop eating breakfast. And what is the first, how many people use fasting with their patients? Just out of curiosity. Okay, just out of curiosity, when you tell them to get rid of breakfast, what's the first thing that they say? Most important meal of the day. What about my oatmeal? What about my granola? I do not know why everybody's so addicted to their oatmeal. I mean, is oatmeal that good? I'm like, if somebody said get rid of oatmeal to me, I'm like, whatever, it's not a big deal. Like, great, I'll get rid of oatmeal. Well, okay, so they had their granola with their oatmeal, so we got rid of that. We got them out, got breakfast, got rid of breakfast, and I taught them how to compress their eating. So I said, you guys are gonna eat, that means my mom's a night eater too. So I knew I had to get her into autophagy a little more. I needed to get her into ketosis a little more. So I just explained to her, Mom, here are your hours. Between noon and 7, you can eat. And I don't want you to count calories. My mom has had an obsession with her weight, which is so funny because she's 79 years old. She's never given it up. And she really is like obsessed with her weight. And she's like, but, eat whatever I want. I said, yes, between that time, you can eat whatever you want. I don't want you calorie counting. You're just going to compress your eating. So they did. Both of them did. Within 2 weeks, my dad had lost 15 pounds. And he was like, my dad is a hoot because he would come over. We do Sunday night dinners as a family every week. And he'd come over and he's like, look at my knee. I can just move it. It's amazing. Look at this and look what I can do. And I'm like, yeah, because your inflammation's coming down, Dad. And my mom's like walking around with her pants and she's like, look at all this room I have. And my belly feels so much flatter. Now, I just like to point out that 2 weeks earlier, we were in the emergency room screaming at each other, and the only thing that I care about is that we don't end up back there. And she's all excited about her waistline. Whatever works. So those diet changes were fast. They were fast in reducing chronic pain. And this is a 5-year opioid situation. You're dealing with an addict. And we were able to turn pain around that fast with diet. So please don't underestimate the power of fasting and getting them into ketosis. Really, really, really powerful. So then I added in Dr. Pompa's protocol here. Now, I can tell you, I know my mom has candida. She has had candida her whole life. And she's been fighting it her whole life. I'll also tell you that she's a sugar and alcohol addict. So she goes back and forth between those two. She fights candida, then she feeds it. So she goes back and forth. Now, I found it fascinating when I sat with Dr. Pompa on this one, and he said, oh yeah, a lot of osteoarthritis is an infection in the gut. It's an inflammatory situation. So I started thinking after 22 years in practice, I was like, what did I notice? Do you guys ever notice, those of you that are chiropractors, that a lot of your low back pain patients also have gut dysbiosis? Anybody notice that? I'm starting to see that all the time. These chronic low back cases are candida and parasites and leaky gut, and that they just go hand in hand. So we did literally this first one, we put her on Catatonic. I had her take the NZ so that we could start to break down any fermented old food that had been sticking on the sidewalls of the gut. If you take enzymes on an empty stomach, they'll go in and they'll break down that old food that's sitting on there. If you're a chiropractor and you take lumbar x-rays, you can sometimes see it's like a muddled, speckled appearance on the x-ray where you can actually see this food that's been sticking in there. So she loved NZ because it made her belly flat. So that was great, but it also helped to get us ahead of some of the gut inflammation. And then we added in Vista One. I got her off her fish oils from Whole Foods. And then we added in the ECM. I had her mega dose Jot, and we added an Attack. And within the first month, I hadn't even gotten into the second and third month, she was down to 1 Vicodin a day. Well, that's what she told me, but I really do believe her. I can tell when she's lying to me and when she's not. I feel pretty good. I've got that piece down. But she was down to 1 Vicodin a day. What I did with them, and if you have a family member that you ever have this situation with, is I had a Google Doc that we always had access to, so it wasn't always verbally. I would say, when they'd say, well, where am I? What am I supposed to do in my protocol? I'd say, Dad, go back to the Google Doc, look at the Google document. I mapped out your guys' protocol for the next 3 months. We then had, and again, I'm going to go back to the opioid crisis. We then had a check-in every week and just checked in because I didn't want anything to get like swept under the rug as far as where her pain was at. I didn't want her to be Pollyanna-ish with me. I wanted to know where we were at. And so every week she'd say, I'm doing a little bit better. I'm doing a little bit better. Now this is for 5 years she had been complaining of pain. So we moved her to the second month. We switched to Chiro. Melee, we changed the enzyme. I don't know much about the Chinese elements. That's my next thing that I'm going to venture into. But we started doing water tonify. Water is for the kidneys. Again, Hank was teaching us all about that yesterday. But I will tell you, this second month, her whole personality came back. The mom that I remember came back the second month. So I don't know if it was introducing the Chinese herbs in or if it was just enough time, but her energy was back, her pain was down, her sweet spirit was back. And it has stayed that way. It was really amazing. We added in gold to help with the immune system, Bactrex in case there was any bacteria in there causing the inflammation and arthritis, and then we switched to Vista 2. So, and here's the great thing about my mom is she'll do with supplements, she'll do anything you tell her to do. So they did these, my dad, both of them did this exactly the way you see it right here. And then the third month, we switched back to the ECM Jot. If you guys have a case with like a chronic disc problem, I have used Jot. Anybody else had that experience with Jot? I'll mega dose Jot with those disc cases that are really like hunched over and you know you have a swollen disc. I'll throw like 6 Jot at it, and that has really helped. So I mega dosed Jot with her, and then we went after parasites. And what's interesting about her situation is she's always had multiple stuff going on in the gut. She goes from constipation to chronic diarrhea to cramping. This has been a lifelong problem. By the time we threw in the Tyra-Chi for the Candida, another way to come at the Candida, by the time we got to the end of 3 months, she was not only is her pain, like she doesn't complain about it, her pain is almost completely gone. She is off all medication, like complete painkillers. She's completely off painkillers. I can tell in how she moves. She's moving much easier, and her digestive situation has dramatically improved. She doesn't have that chronic diarrhea. She was getting it so bad that she would have to run to the bathroom because she couldn't hold it. So by solving her pain and her arthritis problem, we were able to really help with her digestive problem as well. Now, with other patients so now, of course, since this protocol has been working so great on my mom, I'm like, let's start to use it on our other patients that have chronic pain. And I will tell you, it is working like a charm. And some of my patients will say, I can't live without the ECM. Some of them say, Jot is the most amazing product on the planet. Don't ever run out of Jot. Some of them like Chiro. I mean, everybody has a different piece that they like. But what I always think is, let's get nutrients to the discs, the ligaments, the cartilage. Let's work on the gut. Let's look at other pathogens that might be there. And then let's start to see what we can do to make some diet changes. And if I follow that protocol, it really, really makes a dramatic difference. But this, and then I love to do my most recent aha moment was with a patient who has had chronic numbness going down her arm, and she couldn't really move her neck. And we would adjust her, and she would feel really good, and the numbness would go away until she got to the parking lot and got in her car. and then it would come back. Anybody had a patient ever like that? Yeah, where it just keeps coming back, and you're like, why is it coming back? So I tried throwing some jod at it. I tried throwing, a few things at it. Wasn't working. I tried some diet changes. Wasn't working. And so I just said, hey, you know what? We're going to need to test your heavy metals. And, we do the provoked heavy metal test, which is DMSA pushing it out of the body so that we can see it in the urine. We use doctors' data. And that heavy metal test alone made the numbness go away. Because the test is literally like a therapy. And so now we're just waiting for those results to come back, and you better believe she's going to go through TCD. So these patients that have chronic pain, we tend to think with TCD, we think so much of the brain and the brain stuff, but don't rule out the spinal stuff. Don't rule out the chronic pain issues. They need TCD as well. I wish I could get my mom through TCD. Maybe one of you guys could coach her through it, because I'm pretty sure I don't want to coach her through that process. But I know my lead is high. My sister's lead was the highest lead we had ever seen on a patient to date. I know that my lead was generational, so I'm pretty sure my mom's lead is the highest. My daughter, my firstborn, her lead is high, so I know lead got passed down through our family. And what I'm now thinking, because my mom has osteoporosis, which led to this whole osteoarthritis, which led to the surgeries, is that lead binds to calcium. And so it started to weaken the bones, made her scoliosis worse, made her arthritis worse, and then she got stuck in the medical trap and did one surgery after another, did the medication, and that's where we had to pull her out from. So, but it's been miraculous, and I'm so grateful not only for Dr. Pompa's protocol, but these supplements. I mean, they saved my mom's life, and they saved our relationship. I literally have my mom back, and I didn't realize how a family that is so forward-thinking in our health, how easy it is to get taken off path so quickly. And it was the promise of one hip replacement was going to be the deal that got her well, and then it turned into 5 years of addiction. So please, if you have anybody with an opioid addiction, please look at this and do it the way I did it, because we're reproducing it and it's working over and over and over again. And I'm just so grateful, because I don't know where we would be without it. So questions on that?
Do we have questions? Hold on. Can you explain the TCD?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize that everybody didn't know. Okay, so TCD is true cellular detox. It's the prep phase, the body phase, and the brain phase. Oh, you're going to show her in there? Okay, should I keep going? You guys look like you wanted to explain it. Okay, so it's the heavy metal detox that Systemic Formulas has. So it's a 90-day detox, and it's aimed at pulling heavy metals out. It also pulls out mold spores out of the brain. I mean, it pulls out all kinds of, I don't know what exactly we know for sure, but we use it for heavy metals, mold, pesticides, BPA, toxic bucket, really full. Yeah, and healing the cells.
So just real quick, it pulls out a wide range of toxins, like she said, metals, biotoxins, industrial, pesticides, you name it. But if you want to know more information about it, we have a booth over here in the corner. You can come talk to me, and Selena's not back here, or Selena. Either one, we can answer your questions.
Yep.
So who else has a question?
Mindy, would you always go through this initial 3-month protocol that you outlined and then implement TCD for after that?
I think it depends on their age. I would say with a lot of people, we lead with TCD. It depends on kind of where they're at. We have a woman right now is just chronic pain, and I asked her to test her heavy metals, and she didn't even want to do that. So I then went to my protocol and started picking from there. So, and this was such a crisis, and it was so clear that something needed to be done that I really wanted to go all in. And in that person who's ready to go all in, I would start the way I started and then go to TCD. So.
And there was a question on what the ECM is, which is, I'm glad somebody asked that because I was looking at the slides and I'm like, what is ECM? It's a collagen ECM.
It's a collagen.
Because
yeah.
I was like, I know we have something that sounds like that. And
collagen powder.
It took me forever because it didn't
I
have
think
the collagen in
isn't
front
it
of
called
it.
ECM on the
Yeah, it was like collagen ECM. So it's like collagen MB or collagen ECM.
Right,
So I was
okay.
missing the collagen part, and I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. And it hit me like in the middle of the night as I was laying down. I'm like, oh,
It's the
that's what
collagen
she's talking about.
You had it in your Metabo shake this morning. Yeah.
Other questions? No, that was it? Oh, wait, one more. Okay, here we go. Last question, and then we're going to take a break.
Thank you for all your care and being super real with, your protocols and your stories and your case studies and being vulnerable. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And also, I practice in Florida and we have huge problems with mold. So your mold guy in California, can you talk a little bit about the tests he runs and like what they do?
Good question, and I hope you have better resources in Florida. He went in and he took the ERMI test. I feel like the ERMI test gets us in the ballpark, so we can either at least say, yeah, you've got it or not. That's a swipe down. The patient does it. They just swipe it down. It's $200. They send it off. So I feel like that starts the conversation. Then if it's bad, what we've been doing is bringing this guy in. He spends about an hour, and he goes around every room, and he measures temperature. He looks for any signs of leaks. He looks at carpets. He takes samples from the carpets and from the drapes. We just found him in our town. I have some virtual patients. I haven't been able to find somebody to do that. And then he'll come back and tell you what to do. So he gave her a whole deep cleaning protocol to do. Now, what my understanding from Dr. Pompa is mold dogs is the most efficient way to actually bring dogs in that will tell you where it is. We don't have mold dogs in our town. We don't have access to that, but that would have been my go-to.
Yeah, I think the mold dogs are good, but I have a dog that got injured by mold, and I think it's horrible for the dog. It ruined her teeth, it ruined her health. So personally, I wouldn't hire a mold dog just for, I love pets. But there's a company online called Assured Bio, ASSURED bio.com. And they have the ERMI test, which is actually a vacuum test. You have to vacuum the area and collect the mold dust, and then you send it in. They also have a swab that you can swab if you can see the mold. They also have an air collection that's not as expensive and detailed as ERMI that you can put on your vacuum cleaner and you vacuum it up and then you send the test results in. You can test for two things. The two biggest, most important things are Stachybotrys and penicillium. Or you can test up to 14 or more. So if anybody wants any of those details, we lost our home to black mold. So I know about detox, I know about testing, I know about the people that are in your town and what to ask them for. Come and ask me about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling, we were talking at the break, I did not want to get into mold. Like, I didn't want to go through the hassles of testing a house. I didn't want to have to deal with it as a patient. Like, I wanted to pretend it wasn't there, honestly, until we started getting heavy into detox, and it just kept showing up and showing up and showing up. So it could be that thing that's that last little piece that's not getting the person well. So,
Sorry.
Washing machine is another one. The front loaders have it, yeah. So.
Okay. Excellent. Can we give her a big
Thank
rowdy
you.
round of applause?